Hello again. In the last video I introduced some of the problems associated with means and memetic evolution. I think the most serious of these is the lack of distinction between the inert code that carries information and the phenotypic or the effects that that information causes. The distinction between phenotype and genotype. Mark Lake wrote, and I think I'll quote this, imitation is not a mechanism of cultural replication because it cannot affect the direct transmission of symbolic structure. The idea for an action is not directly transmitted but retrieved from the action itself. I think this is clearly a problem for a Darwinian approach and clearly not analogous to genes. What we need is some mechanism for separating phenotype and genotype. And towards the end of this video I'd like to suggest a possible solution. But before we do that, I think we need to have a little look at culture. Culture is widely distributed amongst the animal kingdom. We find it quite commonly birds, mammals particularly. Apparently recently octopus as well. I think at its simplest we can describe culture as something like information capable of affecting an individual's phenotype, which they acquire from other individuals, either by being taught or by imitation. And I want to divide culture up into pre-memetic culture and post-memetic culture. I think pre-memetic culture, like I say, quite widely found in animals. I found in the Shannon book, he has a nice example of Israeli rats. Apparently these rats, they learn how to deal with pine cones and then teach that ability to deal with pine cones to their offspring. So it's obviously a culture. I'm going to argue that this is pre-memetic culture and has limited ability of evolving. Basically, the rats learn to do this. If the rats behaviour changes, it's likely that it will degrade and they won't deal with the pine cones as effectively. If by some chance it does improve and they can deal with something else, then that will also be passed on. But I think the basic ability of this to become more developed is limited. And I think the reason here is that we don't have any separation between the code and the phenotype. All that's happening is that the rats are copying this behaviour. I'm going to argue that human culture is memetic and that human memetic culture has two components to it: that shared model building and language. Now, I'm not trying to argue that our culture is discontinuous with animal cultures. Obviously that cannot be the case, but what I am arguing is that at some point our culture became both qualitatively and quantitatively different from the culture of other animals. Anyway, let me look briefly at this shared model building. I would say humans are